This video will focus on a very critical part of the lesson plan design, which is the learning objectives. We will define the learning objectives and we will explore together the criteria of good learning objectives. Learning objectives outline the intended outcomes of instruction and provide a clear focus for teaching and assessment. Learning objectives are specific statements that describe what students should be able to know, understand, or do as a result of a learning experience. Learning objectives outline the intended outcome of instruction, and they're typically written from the perspective of what the student will be able to do. They specify the desired knowledge, skills, attitude, or behavior that learners are expected to achieve by the end of a lesson, unit, course, or program. Learning objectives serve as a roadmap for designing and delivering the instruction, guiding the selection of instructional strategies, resources, and assessment tools. Effective learning objectives adhere to the SMART criteria, meaning they are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bounded. Let's recall quickly what the main aspects of the SMART formula. When we talk about SMART, we are trying to lay out the essentials that should be available in the learning objective statement. So learning objectives should be specific and clearly defined to provide what students are expected to achieve. They should be focused on the intended knowledge, skills, and behavior. Learning objectives should be measurable so that the extent of student achievement can be assessed. They should use action verbs that allow for direct observation, evaluation, or measurement of student performance. Learning objectives should be attainable and realistic given the time and resources available. They should be challenging enough to promote growth and development, but not so difficult that they become unattainable for most students. Learning objectives should be relevant to the subject matter, aligned with the larger goals of the course, and meaningful to students. They should reflect the knowledge, skills, and attitude that are valuable and applicable in the given context. Last but not least, learning objectives should be time-bounded, indicating when are students expected to achieve them. They can be linked to a specific lesson, unit, course, or program timeline to provide a clear time frame for attainment. Let's take some examples for some specific subjects. So in mathematics, a learning objective could be students will be able to solve quadratic equations by factoring using the quadratic formula and completing the square. In language arts, a learning objective could be students will be able to analyze the author's use of figurative language and literary devices to interpret and evaluate a poem. A science learning objective could be students will be able to explain the basic principles of Newton's law of motion and apply that to analyze real-world situation. A learning objective for physical education could be students will be able to demonstrate proficiency in performing a variety of fundamental movement skills, such as throwing, catching, and kicking. For social studies, a learning objective could be students will be able to analyze primary and secondary sources to construct a well-supported argument about the causes and consequences of a historical event. In a nutshell, learning objectives provide clear expectations for both teachers and students, guiding instruction, assessment, and evaluation. They are meant to help ensure that learning experiences are purposeful, focused, and measurable, leading to a meaningful student achievement and growth. And now, if we want to ask ourselves the question of the criteria to write high-quality learning objectives. To write high-quality learning objectives, first of all, we need to consider the SMART criteria. Second of all, we need to think about the alignment with standards and goals. We need to ensure that the learning objectives align with the relevant educational standards, curriculum goals, or program outcomes. So, a teacher should consider the larger context and the learning progression within the subject area. Then, to connect the objectives to the specific knowledge, skills, or attitude that are essential for student success. The third point that we need to take into consideration is the cognitive complexity. So we need to consider the desired level of cognitive complexity for the learning objectives. Thus, we have to align the objectives with the appropriate cognitive domain, such as remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, or creating based on Bloom's taxonomy or other relevant frameworks. Choosing the action verbs that reflect the level of thinking required is very critical. Last but not least, clarity of learning objectives. A teacher should write learning objectives in clear and concise language, avoiding ambiguity or unnecessary complexity. Remember, learning objectives are meant to guide both the teachers and students.